Hi, guys, and welcome to episode number 174 of the Alcohol Rethink Podcast. It's great to be back with you all today, and I'm really looking forward to this episode because it's a fairly unique one. We've got a panel of guests in today, all people on different stages of their recovery of journey in addictions, and I think we're going to have a super conversation. I'm really looking forward to finding out about them, finding out about their journeys, and ultimately being able to give you, the listener, some inspiration or insight on how they did it and also some possibility. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Hi, Patrick. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Actually, one of our guests who we've got here today is a gentleman you may recognize. He was on a few weeks ago. So in fact, I might just start with you, Bash, because you were here. We were just talking maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago, and such a great episode, had so many listens to it. And so we've kind of formulated this episode together. So I just want to give you some credit for that and bringing everyone together here. And welcome back, dude. It's good to have you back.
Oh, thanks, Patrick. It's good to be back. Yeah, I didn't think I'd be back quite this soon. But yeah, no, I really enjoy it. And I've enjoyed the prospect of it. I've been thinking about it a lot in the past sort of like couple of weeks since we agreed to do it.
Yeah, and it was so cool when you came on, actually, because I don't know, I find this in sobriety a lot, right? Is that when you talk to other people in recovery, you've just got that instant connection, right? There's just something for you to talk about straight away, and you just connect on a deeper level. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I really believe it is. And so when we spoke, about 5 days later, you invited me to go along to a festival. It was a little bit wet, unfortunately, but we actually met up in person. We spent some time together, and I really enjoyed that, man.
Yeah, that was lovely. Yeah. And we did a bit of outreach work, didn't we?
Yeah, right. We were going around having conversations, and I think that's one of the cool things in sobriety is you're just meeting new people and getting out there doing new things. All right, cool. So I would love to just introduce everybody else who's here with me today. So I'm just going to start and move around my screen. So Ivor, you're the first on my screen, dude. Welcome.
Yeah. Hey, Patrick. Great to meet you. My name's Ivor. I'm 33 and have been sober as of today 902 days.
Yeah. Wow, amazing.
Well done.
Yeah,
congratulations.
Cool. And Giles, you're next on the screen, dude.
Hi, I'm Giles. I'm 56 and I've been clean for 125 days today.
Awesome.
Oh, well. Nice one, man.
Yeah. So relatively new to it, but
yeah. And when you say clean, what is it that you're clean from, Giles?
Heroin. So I was a heroin user. I mean, 56 years is a long time. So I've sampled most things, and I've had at various stages problems with alcohol, as we were speaking earlier on, amphetamine, cocaine powder, and then heroin. About 2017, I think I picked it up. I had a business that went under, and it was in the final death throes. And I'd got a friend of mine in who I knew was an addict, to build some storage units for me. There's a different revenue line, and he was using. And I tried it in my 20s, and fatal. You know, I picked it up again, and within a week, 2 weeks, I was back on it. And so heroin. So
wow. All right, cool. Well, listen, man, 125 days?
125 days, yeah.
125 days. That's awesome, dude. Wicked. Well, I'd love to learn more about that. And so I'm just going to introduce our final person here, and then we'll come back and we'll learn a little bit more about each of you. So, Jill, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm Jill. I'm 45, which I don't like to admit, but I'm very open about everything else. I still call myself an addict because I work a 12-step program, but I've been in recovery for 20 months. There has been a lapse during that time, but I don't count that because it was short, sharp, painful, and I learned from it.
Mm-hmm.
Bash is the only person who knows about that.
Not anymore.
Yeah, I've opened myself up a little bit. My primary substance abuse is alcohol and benzodiazepines. I had a lot of fun with a lot of other substances, but I didn't get tricked into staying with them. And it's just great to be part of this, because what I have learned is that 12 steps helps me, but I need a greater toolbox than that. And I couldn't have done that without the support that Reborn introduced me to. So I'm really happy to be part of this program today.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Jill. And Bash, why don't you give yourself a little reintroduction as well, dude?
Oh, okay. I'm Bash. 25 years in addictive cycles from the age of sort of 12, 13. Had my sort of fatal emotional psychological crash, lost family, lost everything. Not in a crash, but it was that was my sort of rock bottom when I hit 38. 5th of November. So 2 days time, it'll be 17 years ago. 17 years in recovery. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll celebrate that somehow. Got 10 years sober. It went out again only for 5 days, but enough time for me to realize I needed to put a plan in place, a bit more robust than what I've been doing for the past sort of 9 or 10 years. So I got into my own sort of therapeutic practice after I had my own therapeutic training, read small books, got into therapy, got back into 12 steps, read everything I could. And then I started off my own recovery business about sort of 4.5, 5 years ago. And I'm working with currently about 10, 15 people roughly on a weekly basis with various addictions. Very interesting how whichever it is, whether it's sort of drink, drugs, gambling, whatever, they all form similar sort of patterns. They follow similar sort of patterns. Mm-hmm. So because they follow similar patterns, we can work similar principles, and they tend to sort of come out with the same result, which is not just sobriety, because, I think you can get sober, but it doesn't mean you've dealt with what's going on and what got you sober. So you can still actually lead a very uncomfortable life. So for me, it's important to get people sober, but that's not the primary objective. The primary objective is to get people to feel comfortable in their own skin, like, love and respect themselves to the point they just don't want to use. So it's not a hardship. It's not a, they're not depriving themselves of anything. They're actually, making a conscious choice not to engage because they don't want to compromise who they've become. So we work on creating a really healthy sense of self in that time. So bit of an extended ramble there, or extended intro.
No, I appreciate it. There's quite a lot of gold in there as well, isn't there? But also 17 years in 2 days' time, that's amazing, mate. So congrats.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think it's really important as well to celebrate milestones in recovery, sobriety, whatever we want to refer to it as. And I remember 2 years ago, it was my 4th year of not drinking and taking drugs anymore. And I went and bought a balloon in Morrison's supermarket. It's a big inflatable number 4. And,
lovely.
Yeah, it was. I thought I was going to do it, right? And then I went and paid for it. And the woman at the counter asked me, goes, "Oh, is that for your son or someone?" And I had that moment where I nearly lied. And it would have felt more comfortable just to go, "Yeah, no, it's for my son." But I said, "No, it's for me. I'm celebrating 4 years of not drinking." She went, "Oh my God, that's amazing. Congratulations." Like, she was really, really happy for me. And we had this amazing conversation as a result, as you do, where she told me about I think it was her sister had just recovered from 20 years of alcoholism and stuff like that as well. So yeah, you just never know, right? Which is why I think celebration is an important part of it all. Ivar, so what was it? So you're 302 days, did you say?
902.
902, sorry, yeah. And so from what? Like, what was your
predominantly alcohol, and then after alcohol would come cocaine.
Yeah. So you drink,
it would be
get on the gear.
Yeah, it would be alcohol first. And yeah, it's been a journey. But one that now feels really normal. What is wild today is this weekend I've just got home from a stag do.
Nice.
Which is just nuts. That you can, and similar to what you mentioned about the lady in Morrison's, is when you actually tell people, and to start with, you would lie in inverted commas, the first couple of weeks, couple of months, and if you don't feel comfortable saying, I don't, can't go out tonight because you've got plans, or when you do, you don't want to share that you've, got a really unhealthy relationship with alcohol or whatever it may be. But now when you sit down at dinner, or you're going out and someone says, what do you want to drink? And you say Diet Coke or water, and they go, are you driving? And now I just go, I don't drink. And it's the stag do this weekend is probably not your classic stag do. There's only 5 of us, and all weekend I was getting questioned and quizzed and interrogated about what's it like being here when you're not drinking, and all this sort of stuff. And I would say 99% of the time when I openly say I don't drink, that's met with tell me more.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting.
Stag do is a pretty tough gig, though. I'm taking it that wouldn't have been your first exposure to that kind of environment in 900 plus days.
It's because it was small. It's a wedding where I'm best man and know the guys there pretty well. It's easier. It's not when you've got 25 people turning up at an airport or something, you don't know anyone. That
Vikings.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that I just now, even though I would feel comfortable going, I probably wouldn't go because
you always got those idiots saying, "Oh, just have one. Yeah, one won't hurt."
And I think I would also rather spend my time doing something else, doing other stuff. And I think that's what's been really apparent over the last, I don't know what 900 days is in years, 2 and a bit years, that time has become like hugely important, and I've gained an obscene amount of time, and I don't want to give it away freely to stuff that I don't value. And that's been a real kind of big learn that I've gone through probably the last few months, and saying no to more, not saying no to, do you want to do this, or do you want to take that, or do you want this drink? It's saying no to just other stuff that fills your life and makes it busy.
Yeah.
I don't get much back from.
Yeah, it's boundaries, isn't it? You start setting healthier boundaries for yourself and what you're willing to do and not to do anymore. And it's just not a good trade of value of time there for sure. And so, Ivar, for you, 900 odd days ago, what happened for you to start going on this journey? But what had been happening up to that point, rather than just the?
So externally, life was great. Like, could not be more perfect. It's a strong word, but externally and for as far as like society is concerned, just got married, big wedding, big honeymoon, got back, and throughout the whole period, I've struggled with lots of things, but was really fundamentally just deeply, deeply unhappy. And that kind of culminated in a big bang event, going out, drinking, going missing, and just in a really bad way. So my kind of behavior and drinking and using and that sort of stuff was not particularly regular. And it wasn't necessarily that often, but it would be the intensity of when it did happen. Would just get into cycles. That could be every 3 weeks. It could be a few months, could be 6 months between, these big kind of blowout events. And it got to a point where I just didn't want to live my life like that. Had everything I could possibly want at that point, but fundamentally, internally, was just incredibly unhappy.
What was the unhappiness for, do you think?
I think I was just chasing a feeling and wanting to get to a point where I felt something of chasing peace. And I think the only time I could find that was basically like going out and partying. So you think, once I get to this level or have this thing, and with the awesome work I did with Bash, it was really boiled down to like just incredibly low self-worth. Had to be doing something, had to be being productive, had to be chasing something. And the only time I would feel at peace was basically in the pub.
Yeah.
And then
what did it mean if you weren't then? Like, if you weren't chasing or doing and like all of those things?
It's a good question. I think it's just the way I felt about myself.
Yeah.
And it was just, you had to kind of constantly be on that treadmill, figuratively speaking, of chasing something to find a point where you could kind of pause and breathe. I guess life internally just felt like chaos. even if it wasn't externally. I'm not sure if that makes sense. But it was going through those cycles probably for the 10 years prior to that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are going to understand exactly what you're talking about there.
It's and it's definitely something I see all the time in people, friends, close family. I'm naturally biased because I see more kind of younger males like day to day, but there's definitely, I would say, north of 50% of like friends and friends of friends are behaving in the exact same way, but deem it completely normal because that's what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
And I just feel, very lucky and fortunate that I kind of caught it early, if that makes sense, and was able to kind of get to that kind of what was my rock bottom moment earlier on. So that's definitely a huge blessing.
Yeah. I'll just ask you one final question, if that's all right. And then I'll ask Giles about his experiences. And, you see that 10 years of just like having, or leading up to 10 years of having blowouts, feeling like inner chaos, but on the outside, everything looked well. Who were you telling about how you were feeling up until that point?
No one.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely no one.
Yeah.
It was always that kind of growing up, anyone that asked you, how are things, how are you doing, how's work, how's business, how's life, it's fine, it's okay. It would just be met with a 2, 3, 4 word answer, and that would be the end of it, and put a line underneath it, and wouldn't want to say, you know what, things actually aren't great, I'm really struggling with this, or this isn't going so well and it's making me feel like this. We just put a line underneath it and move on. So no one. And I think I've definitely discovered, and asking for help or sharing has been something I wasn't particularly good at. I wasn't good at it because I'd never done it before. So that was a kind of common thread and common trend. And then on the same flip side, when things were really good, I also wouldn't tell people. So it was just kind of operating in this kind of very insular world of what's going on, how I'm feeling. And the way I coped with that was basically going out.
Yeah. Like on the face of it, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Like you got all this stuff going on. You can't share the bad stuff. You can't share the good stuff, just to use them words, just for context. And then so it's just the explosion of emotions almost just coming out in the drinking and using.
Yeah, if you bottle stuff up for so long, it's gonna rear its head at some point. How that will be, well, I guess will depend on the individual, but that's what I did, and that would be kind of almost like a reset moment. So you say it was on average once a month or something. You build up all this kind of like pressure, and then you'd let it out, and you'd feel terrible for a few days. No.
When you say you let it out, how did that manifest?
Going for a quick drink after work on a Friday or a Thursday, and then that turning into 6 hours, 12 hours, 18 hours, 24 hours.
So you just literally drink yourself into a stupor kind of thing?
You just, going out, kind of chasing the party, not wanting to go home, and just not wanting to go back to how I was feeling previously. So it was just a Band-Aid.
And I think it's fascinating the language around that we use when we go out, like, oh, I want to get out of my head, or I want to get off it, or I want to get wasted, right? Like it's all that idea of escape being you.
Yeah. Anything to not feel the way you're feeling at that particular time.
Yeah, exactly. Just the idea of a blowout. Cool. All right. Thank you, Ivor. Giles, so coming back to you, dude, you started sharing a little bit about your history of using. So do you want to kind of just expand on it for us, if that's all right?
Yeah, okay. To put that in context, I suppose I can relate to a lot of what Ivor was talking about there. And, various points in my life, you kind of go through a hierarchy of drugs, and you get introduced to various different ones depending on the social group you're mixing in. You rarely, although now it's different, rarely do you kind of work your way up to, I don't know what's happened there. Rarely do you work your way up to heroin or something like that. So I did alcohol, did sort of pot for a while, and never ever thought I had a problem with any of those. And then I moved back from London. I've been in London for about 10 years, moved back to where I'm now in Bedfordshire, and had a drink and cocaine problem that kind of caught up with me without realising. And much the same I was talking about, a lot of people will do a couple of bottles of wine a night and not, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not alcohol dependent. And you just don't realise it. And I think I kind of found myself there. And, but all of them I had got on top of, I'd kind of done it for a while and kind of off my own back, I'd sorted it out. And then I was really miserable. I mean, obviously all of that was covering up, the kind of trauma that I'd got inside me that I didn't know I had. And I was using various tools and pharmaceuticals in my life to deal with that. And then when my business was going under, I dabbled with heroin. And you cannot do that on your own. There is absolutely I've tried, believe me, you cannot get clean on your own. It's impossible. You need help. And I'd never asked for help before. I'd never admitted I needed it. So, I didn't know what to do there. And I was kind of a functioning heroin addict. So you wouldn't have known necessarily that I was an addict if you'd have met me. Managed to hold down a job for most of the time. And there's only very few people knew about it. And even then, it was only because I got caught. So, and a friend of mine introduced me to Bash. And, I'd gone through the whole thing. I mean, I'd lost everything, my relationship, my business, my house. Even now, I'm sitting in my auntie's house in her spare room, sleep in a single bed. I've had to really reset. And my friend Gavin introduced me to Bash. And it kind of opened up this whole recovery thing that, one, I didn't know existed. And, excuse me, two, I'd never used before because I've never been in rehab or anything like that or sat in a circle of people. I've tried the AA meetings and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't really get on with that. I don't really get on with clubs and stuff like that. Anyway, how can I? All of those, to my mind, are forced abstinence. Whether it's a book, whether it's a program, you're counting down the days like you're in the boob, and that felt like hard work. It felt like it's been forced on you. This doesn't. Once I'd got to the bottom of the reasons why I was doing it and everything was effectively just a Band-Aid, it seems quite easy now. I mean, it wasn't easy. Obviously, you have to go through the physical side of getting off of it, which wasn't fun, but I'd done it before, But this time, I have to write down how many days I'm clean because I'm not counting them. Mm-hmm. I don't know, you feel the same, Jill, yeah? Mm-hmm. And that's really good. You tell people that and they're like, whatever, and they're chipping off for 3 months for residential rehab or whatever. And then they come out and use again. And it's because, I think, Ivy, you said, it's a Band-Aid. Oh. But look, you know what? The whole thing with using, I'm not fine to that because if I do, that doesn't negate everything I've done up until this point. I'm not falling off anything. I'm not starting from scratch. If it happens, I just use the tools that I've been given.
Yeah, nice. Well, I would love to learn more about tools or the tools that work for you in a moment. So
Sorry, I rambled on.
No, not at all, man. That's what this purpose of this podcast is about. Is like to get to know us all and all of our different experiences. Right? Already, we're hearing very unique experiences, a common theme that's running amongst them. And so, Jill, maybe we'll pass over to you now for a little bit and just kind of hear a little bit more about how alcohol and benzodiazepines. Yeah.
Benzos.
Yeah, benzos. Yeah. How were they? How did that happen? And
well, where to start? I've always been a drinker, since the moment I picked up a drink at the age of 14, I loved it. It made me feel flying. So alcohol's always been there in the background for me. And what turned into one glass of wine, turned into half a bottle of wine, turned into 3 bottles of wine very, very quickly. I drank very heavily. I stopped drinking because I wanted to get pregnant. And I stayed sober throughout both of my pregnancies, but I suffered from terrible postnatal depression, and I was prescribed Valium to help me with some of the feelings. And I became addicted to it. And I started buying it independently from other people selling their prescriptions on the street and then on the dark web. And it sucked me in. And I'll be honest, that is still the thing that I crave more than I crave a drink, because I like the fact that it sedates the feelings that I have in my mind. I suffer from ADHD and OCD, and it helps me manage my mental health. I've just said it helps.
Yeah, good catch.
Yeah, it helped until it stopped, and it destroyed my entire life. I lost my marriage. I lost my children. I lost my career. I lost everything I believed about myself. And that was 6 years ago. I've been through detoxes. I've been through rehab. I've been through SMART. I've been through 12-step. I've done it all. But only through working with Bash have I managed to create a toolbox that is a little bit of everything that helps me. And I don't count the days. I never stand up in a Narcotics Anonymous meeting and collect a key ring, because that's my business. It's my recovery. And I feel very passionate to be proud that I'm in recovery, to be open that I'm in recovery, but I don't need a badge of honor to show that I am. It's something very, very personal to me, and something that finally I can take pride in, because a lot of my journey, like has already been spoken about, it's about low self-worth. It's about high expectations for myself. It's about fear of failure. It's about self-pressure. So what I've learned is to work around those feelings about myself and the world that I live in, as well as the picking up of the different drugs, I say, which are healthy drugs like exercise, fresh air, the sea, a meeting, talking to my counsellor, talking to Bash, getting to a 12-step meeting. I'll pick and choose depending on what I need that day. Sorry, that was long-winded.
No one needs to apologise on this podcast, so please do stop. It's not long-winded at all, right? Like it's valuable. It's information that everyone's going to hear, and like I can't remember what I said before during the start of this one, people are going to relate to it, and so it's really important. But again, thank you, Jill. And again, it's like we're just noticing that theme around self-worth and high expectations. And the next question I want to ask, and I'm going to put it out to all of you, is about the function of your addiction. And what's really interesting, I find, and even just from hearing all of you, like it starts off in one way and it finishes very differently, right? And so when I asked Jill, I'll start with you because we were just chatting, but like, what was and you kind of already answered a little bit, but let's see if anything else comes up. Like, what was the function of your addiction, do you think?
So it started with a bit like Ivor said, a reward, it's the end of the day. I've done well today. I'll have a glass of wine. Or it's been a shit day today. Sorry. It's been
swear. Yeah. Okay.
What quickly developed was I was in a really high-powered job with 2 children in a snobby upper-class village where the mummy club were all drinking Prosecco and snorting cocaine on a Friday night.
Right.
And I fell into that. But what happened to me was very quickly, I was at a PTA meeting trying to put up a Christmas tree, having had to have 2 glasses of vodka for breakfast to settle the shakes. And that then led to a tablet to settle the shakes that were coming from the shakes. And I couldn't get out of that without being medically treated, sadly. I had to get medical attention because I was physically addicted, not just emotionally and mentally addicted.
When did you realize that? Like, because it's like that idea of the frogs in boiling water. You know, like if you put a frog in just cold water and put it on the pan, it doesn't realize it's being boiled until it's too late, right? And I think that's how it can work with addiction. Giles what's the word? Yeah, Giles mentioned something similar earlier, but yeah, when did you notice that was becoming
like that frog? I boiled in my bedroom alone, and I called an ambulance and said, I'm not well. And I ended up being hospitalized, and spent 16 days in hospital, developed acute pancreatitis, and had to be medically detoxed. And it was only then that I realized how dangerous it had become. But I still relapsed 3 times after that. That wasn't a dark enough moment. That wasn't a rock bottom enough to make me stop.
See, I think that's a fallacy. That whole rock, you can't come up till you hit rock bottom. I've hit rock bottom low. I bounced off the bottom, and that's not been a trigger for me. If that was it, that would be enough, wouldn't it? You would just be, that would happen.
You would think.
It would stop. Yeah.
You would think. There's more rock bottom.
You just become more resilient.
Yeah. It was as though, I've survived this, I can survive something else.
Yeah.
It made me feel a bit conquerous in a way, because I'm arrogant.
Yeah, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Yeah, it's a kind of arrogance, isn't it? Yeah.
There's lots of biases about the brain that these psychologists came up with, and there's definitely one around that where if we do something and we get away with it, even if there were consequences to it, and we survive, then our brain thinks it's okay again to do it for the next time, which is so perverse, really. But
yeah.
I work in recovery, and I talk to people who have been through journeys like we all have. And something I always say to somebody is, what's your next? What is your next? Because there can always be a what's next. And I find it a really interesting question to explore, because I wonder that within myself. Okay, I didn't, unlike Giles, become addicted to heroin yet. What's next?
Yeah. Jill, one thing that came up when you were sharing as well, right, is how when you wanted to have a baby and when you became pregnant, how your brain was able just to switch it off, right? Because the value of having a child and reproduction was bigger than the value of the function that addiction was serving, which is just fascinating. Yeah.
And yet I don't live with those children anymore, which is what has led to my relapses. It's as though the worth of those children was worth more than me. And that is what has led me to the 3 relapses since then.
And if I can just interject there, Patrick, and this happens quite a lot, especially with ladies who get pregnant, is they immediately lose the desire to smoke or drink or whatever it is, because, I've always maintained the opposite of addiction is purpose. So once we hit that purpose, all of a sudden the desire to go just drops. Doing the job that I do, I'm constantly in purpose. I'm either in it working with people, or I'm reading on about it, or I'm listening to podcasts, or I'm doing my cold showers. There's always something purposeful that I can be getting on with. And it's the constant, I think if you can start using purpose as your constant rather than chasing happiness, because it's not always there. If your dog gets run over, there's nobody on this planet that can make you feel happy.
Well, that's not a purpose in itself, is it?
Not the goal.
Well, no, that's it. But in that moment of sort of like agonizing pain when your dog's got run over, you can find the purpose. Well, what do I need to do here? I need to sit with this grief for a little bit. I need to process what's going on for me. I need to process it and not run away from it and be with it and not reach out. I need to reach in. I don't need to reach for a drink. I need to reach in. What do I need to do? What's the conversation going on in my head? What am I negotiating with? Because it's not the experience, it's how we experience the experience, So, purpose is always accessible. It's always a constant.
Yeah. Nice.
And
Cool.
purpose can be adjusted. That's something I've learned from Bash, because I used to put a lot of purpose on children, on career, on satisfying my parents. Actually, that purpose is, as Bash has just said, it can be driven within. And, I work a 12-step program, so I'm meant to have a higher power. But actually, what I've learned from the Reborn program is that higher power can just be what's going on in my own beating heart.
Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah. One of the things I do with all the guys I work with is a values exercise in that first session, because our values and purpose are the things that are most important to us, and they change over time as well, which is even more important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is why we have to polish our recovery plan, I think, Patrick, because what's important one day might not be important in a week's time or something. So it's always important to really study. And this is where the meditation comes in. If you meditate every day, you're sharpening that sort of like awareness muscle. So if there's I had a client recently and he said, I don't know what happened. I ended up he only had a slip a few months ago, and he was just doing too much exercise. He'd sort of like lost his attention, and he's like, I'm doing 3 hours of exercise a day. I'm like, no, that's probably a bit too much, because when you're doing 3 hours in the gym, you've taken probably 2 hours away from your family. So that you've lost your balance, you've lost the harmony in your sort of recovery existence. So, we had to study that. And again, that was really interesting. You can overdose on your recovery plan if you're not careful.
Yeah. And I find, sorry, Jill, one sec. What I find with, if you're doing 3 hours exercise, like a massive trigger for me, not necessarily to drink these days, but to escape how I feel, is tiredness. Like the feeling of tiredness. I think it's true for a lot of people as well. Jill, what were you going to say? And then we're going to move to Giles afterwards.
Simply was going to say that I've had recovery explained to me as like being part of an orchestra, and you have to find the harmony within that. And yes, there's a conductor, but you need to be your own conductor, and you need to be able to find that balance between the different instruments.
Yeah, love that. Nice.
And I think the important thing, just to extend on that one, Joe, it's when we're the conductor, sometimes we find ourselves in the orchestra instead of holding the baton.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Love that, Bash.
Giles, so what had the function of your addiction become, do you think?
I'm not sure as I fully understand the question.
So like what purpose was it? We're talking about purpose, right? Like what purpose was the addiction serving?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, numbing, taking away the pain of whatever I was going through, which I can cope with life's ups and downs, trials and tribulations. Your dog gets run over, as Bash says. Perfectly capable of dealing with those, dealing with other people's problems, deferring, massively capable of dealing with that. But bubbling under the surface, as I've said, I was unhappy. I've been unhappy nearly all my life, but just haven't realised it, haven't had that brought to the fore. And what I was doing was using drugs to mask that, to numb myself from that pain that will bubble up every so often. And I'd done it my entire life with alcohol, I say, with all the other drugs. And usually that's tied in with partying, because most of the drugs are socially acceptable. Whether you're doing Manly or cocaine, that's socially acceptable. It might be illegal, but nobody bats an eyelid. And you can find yourself trotting along, and you've done all of these. And every so often, as I say, and I don't think I'm unique in this, people do too much. You find yourself getting into trouble. And I think I would have carried on doing that. But heroin it seems to be pretty unique in as much as it never has a good ending. because your tolerance builds up. Therefore, the overhead builds up, and you'd have to be a lottery winner to have enough money to. So your life starts to unravel around that, because you start selling things, you stop turning up for work, and you hit crisis, and so that's my purpose was, as I say, masking the underlying pain that I had in my life. And if it hadn't been, I don't want to use the word thankful, but I think heroin did me a big favor in a way that it made me look at this. And I've said to Bash several times, I wish this had happened 30 years ago, because I feel I've wasted so much time not looking at this, that especially on heroin, because you live in you have a veil, you live in a fug a lot of the time. And if I hadn't started using heroin, I would have carried on probably with drinking or other stuff that you can function on and society gives you the thumbs up for. I'd have never looked at it. So, the purpose of my addiction would have taken me to my grave. I would have done it my entire life.
Yeah. But, I think had it happened 30 years ago, would you have been ready to look at it then?
Not 30 years ago, maybe. When I got divorced for the second time, and I'd only got children from my second marriage, it absolutely mullered me. And I went to therapy to, get over how bad I felt. And, but I didn't get to the root cause of what I needed to.
Well, even just that language, get over how bad I felt rather than process how I felt.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yes, exactly so. But in my head, I'd put it down to this traumatic divorce and being separated from my kids, which was really traumatic. But yeah, but actually, that wasn't the problem. The problem was what happened in my childhood. Now, that therapist I saw didn't do any of that. It was Bash that did that. And then looking at it, shit, right, okay, I can see that makes sense now. So, look, you can't change the past, and I'm thankful that I am where I am now. But yeah, if I'd have found that in my early 30s, I wouldn't have wasted so much bloody money and time. Yeah.
Today, my son was very dysregulated, and he was having a really hard time. And I was calm for a majority of it, and until I wasn't. And it got to this point where I just nearly started crying because I couldn't deal. It got to that point where I was triggered by my own past, being a child and being shouted at and stuff like that. And so Gabor Mate always says, it's not what's happening to us now, it's what happened to us, right?
Yeah.
It's not what happened. It's not what's happening to us in the now. It's what's happened to us in the past. And I think there's so much to be said for that. Because of why we react the way that we do and stuff.
And people joke about it. It's kind of a bit of a cliche that I was abused as a child. I wasn't abused at all. But actually, it is serious. They're your formative years, and they have an effect that echoes to the rest of your life. And most people have a great childhood. I had a pretty good childhood, but some things happened that I hadn't thought about that absolutely changed the way I look at the world and look at myself.
Yeah.
And, if I'd have had, Bash's apps, then, boy, I could have sorted this out sooner, instead of abusing myself and, covering it up, sweeping it under the carpet. And it's tougher for guys, I think. You're not taking anything away from women, but women tend to collude, they confide in each other a lot easier, a lot more readily than guys do. Even guys that are close don't do it because they perhaps don't even know that they've got it in themselves. They don't see it in themselves, and because their mates don't look at themselves either, they don't say to each other, I think you've got a problem with this. I think women tend to flag stuff like that sooner.
Unless you're a tomboy like me.
Well, there you go then. Yeah, then you're buggered because you're surrounded by guys who aren't going to pick it up, hey?
You've just triggered me to say something that I think is really relevant to what you've just explained, Giles, and to what, Patrick, you've just commented about Gawamate. At primary school, our head teacher used to say at the end of assembly, you must persevere.
Mm.
So from a very early age, it was in my head that you must try harder, you must try harder, you must try harder. And that's not something that damaged me, but that's something that I've carried. But I've also carried that into my recovery. Every time I've relapsed, that sentence has come back into my head. You must persevere. Try again.
There's a positive in everything. You've got to try and look for the sunny side, and even the crappiest things you do, there's a lesson in there somewhere.
If you search.
But it's amazing how that belief at such a young age shaped you to do certain things, and now it's kind of almost transformed and it's helping you in a different way. But and I think this is the conversation around trauma is when the word trauma is mentioned, I think a lot of people's minds go to these really terrible things that happen in the world, right? Like all different types of abuse. But even the more innocuous things, right? Things a teacher says, things a parent flippantly says, or family members, right? They even your peers, they can all have a massive impact in your life as well.
Sorry, I mean, it's just, this made me think, sorry, Patrick, for interrupting, but even comparing one of your children to the other child,
that's
going to create a sense of low self-worth. I'm never going to be as good as, my brother Johnny or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then there is the birth of low self-worth right there. And as we all know, all of us in the room, the baseline of addiction is trauma, then it's low self-worth. Then it's the addiction and its behaviours, so you've created that foundation the moment you're sort of comparing your kid to others or making them eat food they don't want to eat, for example. That's traumatic. I'm not good enough to be able to say no to a food that I'm not enjoying. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
But also subtle. And this is the thing, like you said, I was trying to sort of tag on to what you said. We're looking for all these big T traumas. My dad never hit me. My mum never shouted at me. My dad never drank, blah, blah, blah. But it shows up in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it can be really inconsequential conversations or a scene in a movie or something that carries with you, or your headmaster when you were 6.
Yeah, I mean, I had one of my clients a couple of years ago. He's having a conversation. He couldn't find his traumas, and then we sort of found out that both of his parents, although they were both very professional, one was a magistrate, the other one was a palliative care nurse, but they were both qualified psychotherapists. And I rewound that conversation a little bit with him, and I said, let's just rewind a little bit to that bit where you told me about both your parents being psychotherapists. Did you find a separation between when you were at school? Was it like a you and them situation? And he went, God, yeah. Every time something was happening, everybody turned to me for support and everything like that. So what they'd done, they'd emotionally equipped him too young. So that created the separation between him and his peers. So he couldn't enjoy a normal sort of childhood, like mucking in with everybody. There was always this sense of them and him, and that followed him into adult life. And there was the birth of his low self-worth. Again, there was no intention from either parent. There's no parent that sits there plotting how you're going to mess your kid up. But we're driven by our sort of childhood traumas and how we were brought up. And
almost it'd be easier if your parents did beat you because you'd have something to point at.
Exactly, you can rationalise with that. You can negotiate with that, right?
Yeah. Mine both with the best of intentions, but we don't come with instructions, do we? They were kids once themselves, and yeah,
it's amazing. Just having this conversation has reminded me of one of these little teas. I had an older cousin. I was probably about 12 or something. He was older. Well, he seemed much older at that time, 18, 19 or whatever. And I remember him telling me that I'd put on weight or that I was getting fat or something. And for at that age that had never really registered as anything to me. But to hear it from a peer, someone who I looked up to, that's when starting to get self-conscious, right? And so I started making it a problem for myself. And just an innocent comment like that for someone saying.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm always telling my kids, words are powerful, right? You don't have to be kind to everyone, but you don't need to be mean to people.
Yeah. No, I did that with my son. I only said, no, mate, you can say one sentence in 4 different ways and it'll have 4 different meanings. As you say, words are powerful. And once they're out, they're out. So,
yeah.
Count to 10, then say what you're going to say.
Or worse, once they're in, right? And that's what we're all had to deal with. Ivor, let's get back to you, dude, because I haven't heard from you for a little while. So kind of like on that question of the function of your addiction, maybe we started to get into it a little bit earlier, but what do you, just as we've been speaking, what's been coming up for you?
Quite a lot.
Yeah.
I think partly feeling at peace for a period of time, whether that would be an hour in the pub or an evening out or a whole weekend, starts to quiet down your feelings and emotions. And it's that kind of, you feel like you could breathe for the first time. For the first 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you start relaxing and the brain starts to quiet down. I think for the most part, all the things we're talking about make you feel good. And for as long as I can remember, I've never felt particularly good. May come across externally, and this is going back a while, confident, outgoing, upbeat, got your shit together, but never felt any of those things until you're out drinking and doing other stuff. So it was that kind of making me feel how I wanted to feel. And earlier on, feeling really good. But it then, like anything, that feeling diminishes. To get that same feeling back, it needs to be more or longer. And then you're then just trying to replicate that kind of first feeling or those feelings you had 1 year ago or 5 years ago, whatever it was. And then it just snowballs.
Yeah. Like Giles said, the tolerance starts going up and then you start having to do more and your brain adapts and all these things.
Nothing feels enough, does it? If you've got that low self-worth residing, until you've sort of like, addressed the low self-worth and started enjoying who you are rather than resenting who you are, nothing's going to feel enough. So until we feel enough, whatever we do, whatever we take, whatever we snort is never going to be enough.
Yeah. And I still think there are traits and parts of me that have that behavior. But I'll choose to channel that into other stuff. Work and business has always been something that's been kind of a common thread for a long time, which is like a healthy addiction, again, in inverted commas. But actually, for the most part, probably not, because it takes me away from myself. And there's only, it's all about a lot of stuff Bash and I talked about a couple of years ago. It was all about balance. And then into exercise. And Bash was talking about someone who, spending 3 hours in the gym. When I first kind of went sober and started this journey, I picked up running. But there was no, how my brain worked then, there was no, I'll just run 5K twice a week. At this point, I'd ran probably 4 times in a month and hadn't been before that. And I'm instantly going, all right, let's do a marathon. Let's do an ultra. 50 miles, 100 miles. Like the stuff the route I go down is to the extreme. But actually, when through, I guess, my work and business and now through sport and exercise and predominantly running, you go to some of the marathons, ultra marathons, meet these super successful people in societal terms. They're all the same as me. On the same side, you've got a whole bunch of people, I mentioned before we started, listening to podcasts where people are saying, this is how they're feeling, this is why they're doing this is why their behavior is this, and going down the route of addiction. On the other side of that, there are these people who run 250 miles in 5 days through a desert, or build a business worth £1 bazillion or $1 bazillion. For me, the behavior and the way the mind works is exactly the same. It just acts out in different ways. One you put on a pedestal, and the other one, whatever the opposite is of pedestal, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Look at it in the gutter. Pedestal or gutter.
Yeah.
Where's that middle ground, hey?
It's the all or nothing thinking that the brain loves.
Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
And I think the practice there is something I'm always advocating on a daily basis to myself and everybody I work with, everybody I talk to, replacing the buzz of addiction with the buzz of mediocrity. So even just making a cup of tea and squeezing that tea bag till I get the tea the color I want, I'm getting a little buzz out of that. And loads of these little buzzes mean that I don't have to go for the big buzz. Yeah.
I spent 2 hours earlier before this called filleting fish, and it was really quite meditative. You're focusing doing one thing. One, you don't want to chop your finger off. You're doing something that is a kind of trivial task, and it's going to feed me for the next couple of weeks and chuck them in the freezer. But doing something as trivial as that, I know it's not super common, but just get so much kind of like peace and joy from.
Yeah.
Elsie,
I get it from cutting the grass.
Yeah. I get gardening in my mum's garden because I haven't got one of my own, but I go around there and I plant bulbs and wait for them to grow.
Yeah, stuff that used to be a chore and inconvenience. Now look and go, I did that, and get more joy from doing, I use the word trivial, I don't know why, but trivial things, and getting a lot of like joy and happiness from them.
I don't have strange for a jigsaw though.
I've tried those, but again, the way my brain works, go straight to the 1,000-piece one. Probably not at that level yet.
Or white. White puzzle
fold on
pieces. Bash, I'd love to ask you as well then, dude, what the function of your addiction was, or when it first
That's a really good question. I was thinking about this today as we were thinking about some of the questions and stuff, and I thought of a few questions that I might sort of pose or might have received this morning, and that sort of came up, and it really made me think. I never really thought about it deeply before, but for me it was about status. So because I had very little to nothing, not even food and electric and gas and things like that, which I didn't even have a toothbrush. I hadn't even brushed my teeth by the time I got to about 8 or something. Which is why I was having my teeth all day. And it was a real sort of grim childhood, if you like. So because there was so much deprivation there, I really reveled in standing at a bar with a nice press shirt on, drinking a beer, and then running in the toilet and doing a line. I felt like that was my measure of success. I had cracked life at that point. But what I was doing was actually just cracking what I had left of my sort of dysfunctional childhood. And again, for me, it wasn't until I lost everything at 38 that I had to sort of wake up and realize that that's not how I'm going to sort of redeem myself or prove myself or validate myself. I've got to do it on my own terms, by my own means, and not do this show, if you like, so other people can sort of, oh, he must be doing all right if he's got through 2 bags of coconut or whatever I was doing, or spunk $2,000 in the casino and then gone to the cash desk to get another $2,000 out. That was me feeling successful, but I was using self-harm as a means of success, or a measure of success, if you like. And I'd never ever have had if somebody said that to me at the time, I'd be like, what the crap are you on about, man? I would have just said, go off and take your pills, I'm having a good time here, but 25, 30 years later I can reflect and go, yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. I was using addiction as a means of validation to make my low self-worth sort of be okay with itself, if you like. And to keep it at bay.
The alter ego thing, like Jules, for instance, where that child version of you is looking after you, is only doing the best it can, with the tools it has, and they were your tools, weren't they?
It was money, I made quite a bit of money at one point, and I just had all this. It was, the world became my playground, and I used all the tools I could get to sort of self-harm as best as I could. But on the surface, it appeared like I was having a good time and enjoying myself, in inverted commas, but really I was just drilling myself into the ground, just doing that, boiling myself like the boiling frog. So that's a lovely question. Thanks, Patrick, for that.
Yeah, nice one. Thank you for answering. When you say on the surface, it looks like I was having a good time. Who do you think that was other people thought that about you, or is that what you thought you were projecting to other people?
Doing other people's thinking for them. If I've walked in there in a brand new outfit and I've crazy haircut or whatever it was I was trying to do to validate myself. So and again, that was the big thing which I've learned is I've got to really negotiate with the low self-worth and accept it. Do you know what I like that it's there today. I'm not avoiding it. I'm just accepting it, holding it. I'm not running away from it. It's come up a few times during the session. And every time when one of these, lovely guys has mentioned my support in their journey, it's gone straight into that, oh my God, that sort of, not imposter syndrome, that's the wrong word, because, whenever I get the imposter syndrome, I look at the data. The data is pretty good so I can contra that off, if you like. So it's just that, oh my God, it just brings it to light that there's something about me that's worthwhile. And it's got to try sort of like bypass this low self-worth to be able to present itself, And I'm okay with that because it keeps me humble, it keeps me on the ground level. I don't get into, I've had stages in my life, by this last sort of 5 minutes of talking where, I've appeared quite grandiose and, I don't like that. I don't like witnessing that in others. So why would I think that was okay for me? Or whether that's acceptable. So I'm grateful for the addiction that I still host, but it's in remission. I'm grateful for that because it keeps me having my cold showers in the morning. It keeps me doing things like this. It keeps me reading books and being fascinated about addiction. It keeps me doing the work I do. So I'm grateful for the addiction, and I'm grateful for the low self-worth because it keeps me humble and it keeps me on ground level, so I don't start flying off into the stratosphere and getting carried away on my own ego cloud.
Bash, I'm grateful for that phrase you've just used, addiction in remission. I've just written that down. So apologies, everybody, if I look distracted at points, it's because I'm writing things down that stand out to me. Because I work a 12-step program, I have to announce myself as, my name's Jo and I'm an addict. But actually, I am an addict in remission.
Yeah.
And I've never phrased it in that way or framed it in that way before. And
I've never heard it put that way.
Stick that on my mirror.
And I think that would be allowable in 12 steps. So the one time I'm willing to not represent myself in a true way. So as you all know, I don't believe I am an addict, but I do believe I host addiction, right? I don't believe there's a cure for addiction, right? But I believe that if you make the right choices in life, you can put that addiction in remission if you use all your recovery tools. You can put it in remission and it will stay in remission all the time we keep, activating our toolbox and not get bored and keep mixing it up, so keep the tools interesting, and keep it so you're striving for it as well. And that's the important thing for me. Like I really admire you, Ivor, and anybody that runs, because if I run more than like 100 yards, I just want to go to bed for half an hour. It's just not my sort of exercise drug of choice. I like to play badminton because I get a buzz. Every time I hit the shuttlecock, or I'm diving across the court to catch it, or whatever it is I get a buzz from the game. So when I'm playing for like whatever it is, 2 to 3.5 hours at a time, I'm in joy. I'm in total joy. There's no part of me that's not enjoying the process of that, and I'm getting the benefit of it. So that's the key to recovery, is to finding a plan that you find, joyful. Not too strenuous, but not can't be lazy with it, But I say I don't like cold showers, but I like the feeling after I've had a cold shower, and I have to remind myself of that.
Oh, you made me.
Yeah. But I've got to do it every day. So I think you've really cracked it when you get to the stage, and if you don't want to do it. So I do sometimes. I'm not going to have a cold shower, so I'm just going to give myself right. It's too cold. I'm in a bad mood. Too tired. Whatever. And I go to get out and I whack it on. It's almost like I go on autopilot and whack it onto cold. And I'm always grateful every time I do it, So.
Do you get straight into a cold shower, or do you go from hot to cold?
Oh, I do hot first, and then I finish off with a cold.
That's more palatable.
That's type 2 fun.
Yeah, it's like getting in. It's like getting in. It's like getting in the shower's cubicle. So I'm wet already. So it's just a case of a quick switch rather than setting up the cold shower. I don't want to walk into a cold shower.
I take it.
You get the reward after.
Some people do the cold plunges. I mean, I've had a couple of clients that have actually bought equipment so they can plunge in their back garden. Yeah, those plunge pools, and they fill it up with ice. And I'm like, geez, I can't do that.
Costs a fortune, and you have to chlorinate it, and then that's putting poison in your body.
Very true.
I would like to ask a couple more questions to everyone before we kind of start to look to wrap this one up. So the first one is, what has been the hardest or most challenging thing for you in recovery or sobriety? And we'll go with whoever comes up with something first here.
For me, it was probably the first, I'm not going to say week, because the first week was fine, because I kind of sort of like locked myself away and also going to London and all this sort of stuff. But probably the first 3 to 6 months, and also probably I guess what I do for a living age I'm at and kind of demographic, doing your first sober wedding, your first sober Christmas, New Year, birthday. So I think lots of the firsts that for me all came in roughly the first 6 months, and getting comfortable, again, linking back to that self-worth thing, where you kind of enter this journey with low self-worth, and then you add addiction to the mix, which doesn't do self-worth wonders at that point. So getting comfortable explaining to people why you're not drinking, why you're not going out, and feeling like you have to justify yourself. So I'm not sure if that answered the question, but it was the hardest thing were all the firsts, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sober firsts.
I had one of my hardest challenges about 6 weeks ago. So, bearing in mind, I'm just approaching sort of 17 years now. I found myself at my friend's 60th birthday, and I was hanging out with people that were my drinking, gambling, boozing buddies, right? And getting gear buddies in the middle of Cyprus. And I genuinely didn't know if I was going to be able to last it or not. All I knew was I had to go there. It was my friend's 60th. So I was laying faith into my recovery plan. I was going on a bit of a wing and a prayer, really. When I got there the first night, everybody was on it. Literally within 10 minutes, everyone got all their gear out and and I'm like, oh my God, this is so hard. And it genuinely was hard, but I got through it, and there was even a plate of gear in front of me. And it was just looking at me, talking to me, and all this. Yeah.
Did they like smuggle it into Cyprus or something?
No, they just got it out there. So
really?
The guy we went to see actually lives in Cyprus, right? So he had his contacts out there.
Right.
It was powdered bash.
and I was actually open with them about it. I said, look, this is what I'm going through at the moment. This is really hard for me. So I got through the first night, and the way I did it was I did a lot of the fast forwarding. And when I say fast forward, I mean, how am I going to feel about myself in the morning? How am I going to feel about myself if I go back and I have to share with my clients that I don't, even if I take the dishonest route, which I'd like to think I wouldn't, how would I feel about knowing that and then doing the nature of the work I do? So I was constantly negotiating with, the character in my head that was trying to get me back into that sort of way of using again. And I did. I managed to. And what I found was fascinating was the fact that it's always there. The addict is always there. It's always going to try and catch me out or trip me up or whatever, or put me in a situation where it's going to sort of like activate those old addictive behaviours. But the one thing I did notice was once I got for that first night, the other 5-6 nights were a breeze. It was almost like I'd reset my recovery mode into Cyprus with my mates, because I hadn't experienced it before. So I think it's almost like my recovery plan had to click me into a certain position where I could get through the rest of the week. I just didn't even think about it. They carried on doing their thing. I carried on doing mine. And what, again, the big learning curve was I didn't feel any less of a part of that sort of experience. I still hung out with them while they did. I still stayed up till 4 a.m, but I just had a coffee to keep me up rather than, a line of Coke or whatever it was. So, yeah, that was my tricky one, but that's again a great question, Patrick, and again I can understand why it was. My early stages were quite easy. I'd hit my rock bottom, and it's like a switch went off in my head. So I'd lost my family, lost my house, lost my job, lost everything, and I remember very, very vividly laying on my brother's floor on this 1-inch mattress, freezing bloody cold after having everything a few months before. And this voice, I can still say it, I can hear it word for word. It literally sounded like somebody was talking to me. And it said, Bash, you're going for a really tough stage at the moment, and you need all the energy that you can get. And this gear, and whatever you're doing, is taking the energy away. So you're going to have to stop doing it right now. And it's literally like a light went off. It was a real blessing. And then, after a couple of months, got to 12 steps, and, that reinforced my recovery plan a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, fascinating.
Jill or Giles? Jill?
Question, please, because I just want to make sure I'm on point.
Yeah, just what's been the hardest or most challenging part of your recovery or sobriety?
I would be completely honest and say every day has been hard, because every day I haven't liked myself internally. But within the last, I would say, 13, 14 months, that's changed. The hardest part was I lost my partner to addiction, not my ex-husband, but the partner that I got together with afterwards. We were together for 2 years, and he lost his life to addiction. I managed to get through the anniversary of that death this year, clean and sober, and be present to support his family. And
amazing.
I'm proud of myself for that, which is not something I am used to saying, because I would normally say I was able to be there for them, but actually I was able to be there for myself this time, which is something I've experienced before. So that's been quite a pinnacle moment for me, and something that has really spurred me into this new chapter of my life. So I'm super, sounds terrible to say, but I'm super grateful for that. I'm super grateful that I was able to look at addiction as an enemy that infects us all, rather than something that I could indulge myself in.
Yeah,
I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thank you. It sounds like the hardest part is just being proud of yourself for what you're doing and who you're becoming as a result of not using. Sorry, I've just froze. I froze then.
But yes, and I've never said that out loud before until now, but I feel proud of myself for not using that as an excuse to screw up.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah,
that little alter ego is very persuasive.
Yeah, would have been the perfect excuse.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my one has been, I'm hoping this is going to wear off eventually, is I thought by now, craving's too strong a word. It's not. I don't crave heroin like you would say if you'd given up smoking. It sounds like this sounds like I'm trying to sell the drug. I'm not. Out of all of the drugs I used, heroin does exactly what it says in the tin every time. Brilliant. It's great, and you don't get a hangover. Whenever it always did what I wanted it to do, and I'm using what is it? The projecting. How will I feel if I do this tomorrow? When that pops up in my head, if something happens, and how can I explain this? I don't think about it all the time. I don't wake up in the morning thinking about heroin like I used to when I had a habit. But it's always there. It's always there, and I'm kind of grateful for that, because it means I can never lower my guard, which is good. Which means I'm not going to get complacent. But I'm surprised. I'm surprised that after, best part of 3 months, that I still think about it every day. And I'm kind of hoping that's not going to be the case like 5 years down the line.
Have you got one of these in your handbag?
Well, that's only if no, I've got one up there in my medical box, but I only smoked it. I only ever smoked it. I never banged anything, thank God. Because then you make it twice as bad. But no, I was just surprised that, like, my alter ego will try and convince me every so often, you can, and Bash knows this, I look at it, laugh at it, a nice try, ha ha ha, giving him a name, all that kind of stuff. So I can deal with that. That's a walk in the park. But I'm just surprised that every so often I'll be doing something, I've been working on my friend's house in Cornwall, and, I'll be digging a hole, and all of a sudden I'll start thinking about heroin. I'm like, where did that come from?
I call it parasite.
Pardon?
I call it the parasite.
Right, okay.
When that feeling comes on, I say, get off, you parasite.
Yeah. Well, where does that come from? So that's been tricky. I thought, because I
think in the moment, I think if this was a session, it would be to negotiate with that narrative. So if you start thinking about it, what is it actually bringing to the table? Because it's not the heroin. It's like, what's wrong with digging this hole that I need to take that feeling away?
No, you misunderstand me. The hole, I was actually enjoying digging the hole, right? And I'd understand if I was going through some angst, it'd be like, 2 years ago or a year ago, I'd have automatically reached for my drug of choice.
Yeah.
there can be nothing going on, and it will just pop into my head.
Yeah.
That's the bit.
And I think, sorry, I should have maybe not come in at that angle. It was more along the lines of not saying no. I mean, I'm not saying go and pick up a bag. I'm saying like, yeah, I could do that. So as the thought comes in, yeah, I could do that, but what are the outcomes? So you're almost finishing the dialogue. So rather than say, oh God, I thought about heroin again today, and it was just thought about heroin, and what have you applied to that thought? So how can you create a relationship with that thought that it doesn't keep showing up? You know, something in there is there's a need for it showing up, isn't there?
Yeah.
So if you can negate with that need or negotiate with that need, then, you know, hopefully that would sort of like go away again because it's come up, it's made itself known. Is that classic what you resist persists? So what is it that you're resisting? Of course, you're resisting using, but there's something else, a point of resistance in there, and that's why it keeps showing up.
I'll have a think about that. I was putting it down to it being physical, like a physical echo of that purely pharmaceutical addiction.
Yeah, just the chemical
addiction
happening in your brain.
Some kind of dead cat bounce of that, maybe.
Yeah. So how can you build a story around that? You know, this isn't actually a genuine craving; it's an echo. It's more of a shadow than the actual thing. You know.
Yeah.
So it's not about. So again, it's the thought is you never know it's going to come in. As I said, you know, we all know this. You know, we've had this conversation. All 5 of us in this room here. We don't know what we're going to be thinking in 5 minutes' time. You might have exactly what it describes us then 5 minutes after we've had this podcast. So where the shit has that come from? You know.
Yeah.
I've just been having like almost like a recovery. You know, a real great recovery session. And now all of a sudden I'm thinking about you. But it's the relationship you have with that thought, isn't it? You know, question it, being with it. What's it you want? You know, why have you showed up today? You know, what it's like Carl Jung said, it's never about what it's about.
Yeah.
So,
maybe that's it.
That thought.
Maybe secretly deep. Because it's not,
just dig a bit deeper.
It's not me thinking I want to use.
No. You're just sort of having a fantasy about it.
Where did that come from? You know,
association.
Yeah.
But it's been a massive part of your life. It's sort of, you know, in a sort of a bit of distorted sense, it's sort of kept you safe and alive for the last sort of 6 years, isn't it? You know, so you're not going to it's like a lost lover, isn't it, really? You know, if you was in a 7-year relationship or 6-year relationship, you're not going to finish with them and stop thinking about it. I mean, most people do think about it. I still think about exes today. I wonder what they're up to and that sort of thing. They like you say, it's a bit of an echo of the past.
I said that.
It doesn't mean I want to go back out with them or remarry them. It just means my thought process, you know?
Yeah. Exactly. Mum today about my ex-husband. I said I'm still desperately in love with him, although I hate him at the same time. There's that addictive allure of what it could have been, once was.
Yeah.
And that's the same as a substance, you know, it's codependency.
Yeah.
But that's shut up, Jill.
No. It's interesting to hear because it sounds like everybody has had the same thing. You know, I just kind of figured that would have waned a bit more by now. And it's not all the time.
I still get fantasies today. It's just I've got the tools to deal with the fantasies today, you know, especially when it's right in front of me. It's not even a fantasy, it's a reality. And I'm in the middle of Cyprus and nobody knows I'm there. So
yeah.
I still dream about cocaine like 6 years later. Out of anything, it's really weird that's the thing that my brain remembers. But I just think it's the effect that these substances have on our brain on a neurochemical level is massive. And like the evolution of our brain, like with the release of dopamine and the importance of survival, like it makes a lot of sense why we might have these fleeting thoughts about these things from time to time. But it's good knowing, Giles, the distinction between, is this a craving or is this just my like brain just having memories of something?
Or maybe it's all those neural pathways reforming or something. But
they're not necessarily reforming, but like we've got 86 billion neural pathways in our brain, right? They don't go anywhere. We've still got the same brain. It's just like you're talking remission, or we can talk about them being dormant. Like they're just like what you don't use, you lose, right? And so they still exist in our mind somewhere, but it's just how much attention or credence do we want to give them, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you normalise that thought, like you just said, oh, why is it still here after 3 months? If you're like, well, of course it's going to be here. You know, I've had a long relationship. It's, you know, it's not going to go anywhere. And I think once you've normalised it, that also can take some of the charge out of the feeling. You know, it's not. It isn't. Yeah.
In the same way that we've still got the same brains that we had as children, right? Even if we've got completely different looking bodies, like we've still got the same brain as a child, and that's why like trauma still shows up. So Yeah, for me, I always think it's never about trying to get rid of something necessarily, but it's just being okay with it being there and not giving it too much attention, especially if it comes up and it's not something that you necessarily want.
Yeah, and the final thing I'll add to that is brains acting as they are. You know, if we've spent like 6 years doing something and we're still alive, there's a part of a brain that will want to keep doing that for another 6 years.
Learn
So again,
that lizard brain.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean,
we
I'm
can
just
have
going to
compassion
carry
for
on.
our own brains. Like, it makes such a massive difference.
Sorry, say that again.
I think the beautiful thing is you can witness it today, Charles. That's something you can witness.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I've been dealing with it the same way as I deal with Jules. I just laugh at it. You know, nice try. Yeah, is that the best you can do? And that seems to work for me.
Can you just share with us, Charles? I love how Jules was formed. Can you share with us how you came to Jules?
Yeah. He said you come up with a name for your alter ego, for your evil drug addict id. And there was this drug dealer I used to buy off, and for some reason he couldn't say Giles, and he used to call me Jules. And in the end, it just stuck, and I thought, I'm going to name my bad side Jules. So
that's brilliant. Yeah,
brilliant.
One other client I worked with him a couple of years ago, and he used to be a sort of pro football player about 10 years ago, I think. And one of his teammates was Johnny Brain. You know, so whenever his addicts came in and he'd be driving along or whatever, his addicts start gnawing the inside of his head off, and he'd be like, "Oh, right, Johnny, I'll speak to you later, mate. I know what this is about.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get my work done. Have a chat at 6."
Nice.
This made me smile.
Good.
Sharing.
I like smiling. All right. So another question. This one actually is from Bash, of some of the ones he sent over to me. And he said, what did you imagine sobriety would feel like? And what does it actually feel like today?
I'm reacting physically to that question.
Why?
Feels free. It feels relaxed. It feels, I can feel every tension in my body subside. I'm taking a breath.
Yeah, you can feel by the sounds of it.
Feel, and I can listen, and I'm present, and I just feel, I don't feel like I'm in a cage anymore. It's beautiful, actually, and I hate it when I'm sat in a fellowship group and somebody says, "Oh, recovery's so beautiful," and they're all trite about it. It actually does feel so. I feel like a bird who's learned to fly.
Oh, is that what you thought it'd feel like?
No.
What did you think it'd feel like?
I felt I would be flapping around inside a bird cage trying to escape. Because I felt like those screens would always be around me and I'd be living within them, trying to fight past them, and that it would just be a constant battle. Whereas today I can get up. I don't have to chase a dealer. I don't have to phone for a prescription. I don't have to worry what time the shop opens. I don't need to wake up at 2 a.m. and ring Deliveroo to get a bottle of vodka. I can just be. And on I'll tell you a secret, and you can edit this out. I live near a church, and on a Tuesday night they do bell ringing practice, and I purposefully lie on my bed every Tuesday night to listen to the bells ring.
Yeah, I like church bells.
It allows me just to be still, and I've never been able to be still in life, but it is my 1 hour a week that I look forward to more than anything else, and I cherish that, and I wouldn't have done that in addiction.
But just out of curiosity, why do you want me to edit that out?
You don't need to. It just felt like I was rambling.
No, it's beautiful. Amazing thing. We're going to leave it right there.
Because I'm self-conscious and got low self-esteem.
Yeah, but look at you here today sharing all of this, showing you're self-conscious.
This is doing me the world of group. Honestly, this is like a therapy session. It's brilliant. Yeah. Thank you. Thank each and every one of you.
Ivor,
I
I
think
think you were about to share. Go on.
Yeah, I did a period of like sobriety. I can't remember when this was. In the last 4 years for 90 days, 100 days, something like that. But it was very much abstinence. So I just didn't go to places I would go to. I just became a bit of a hermit. Tried to eat a bit better, stayed at home, didn't go to certain places that would be triggering or would go back down. And I did that and I was like, I'm fine, obviously, because I've managed to do 90 or 100 days, whatever it was. And then go back out into the world, and history repeated itself. So I thought that's what sobriety would be like, in terms of you would just have to spend more time at home, less socializing, less going out, less doing things, less traveling, less of stuff and giving stuff up. Since over the last 2.5 years, I've gone out for dinner more. I've gone to more, probably I've maybe not gone to more bars, but I've gone to nicer places. I've traveled more. I've got more free time. I've got more energy. I've been able to try new things, hobbies, sports, spend more time at home with my dog and my wife and be more present. So what I thought it would be like and what it's actually like are like worlds apart. And this is that's kind of the talk track I go down when someone says, oh, I've thought about stopping drinking or stopping whatever. What's it like? You know, how do you deal with it? Like, I don't know how I didn't deal with it, if that makes sense. I don't know how I lived my life previously to how I live my life now.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? Just how essentially what I was hearing when you were sharing it is that you thought sobriety was going to be boring and that you weren't allowed to do anything or go anywhere. Right.
Yeah.
And so like we hear the word sober, or I think we used to associate the word with sobriety as being boring, as not being able to do anything because of the abstinence element of things. But that's not what it's about at all. It's about rediscovery. It's about finding out who you want to be and like doing all these different things. Some things you might like, some things you won't.
If you know, I never want to come across overly confrontational with certain things, but if you know, someone says and this is probably in the earlier days, we're going out tonight, you coming? No. And my initial talk track there was, I'm taking a break. I'm, you know, not drinking for a bit, whatever.
Yeah.
You're boring. Now I look back now and going to sit in a pub and then go back to someone's house after until God knows what time. That's really boring.
Yeah.
The other side of the fence, I call it.
At each other and nobody listens.
Yeah. So for the most part, if you know, it doesn't happen at all anymore, really. But if someone kept pressuring, you're boring, that would be my kind of instant bite back. It's just like, I don't think I am. I think you guys are. If people wanted to get argumentative about wanting to come out, and then actually you find after a few months or 6 months or a year, you've forgotten some of these people look like. You don't interact with them because you also realize you had nothing in common with them anymore. And there's actually people, I don't know if I can say this, but I will, people that where we'd go to dinner parties and stuff like that, there were people there that I thought were boring way back when. And over the last 2 years, I'm like, and now some of my closest friends will actually realize I have more in common with them. And I feel guilty for thinking what I did. And there's a few of them now I've got a relationship with, and I'll tell them that, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, I thought you were really dull. And they sort of look at me like, I'm not sure if it's not a very nice thing to say. And then would explain my rationale after. So yeah, I thought it would be boring, and it absolutely isn't.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Something you said there really intrigued me. You said something along the lines of kind of announcing that you're sober, rather than I'm just not using right now, but I'm sober. Why does nobody introduce themselves as at a dinner party and say, I'm a drinker?
Yeah.
Or, I'm a wino. Why do we have to announce ourselves as sober? That aggravates me.
I think, and without wanting to jump back too far into the conversation, Bash mentioned something earlier about, you know, wanting to go out and be dressed a certain way and drinking, doing this, that, and the other, and you're projecting that externally. But I just think it's because it's just normal. It's societal, and the kind of how did you function?
You're right. You're right. I just find it mentally it's my nutting.
I can explain why I do it. I don't know why anybody else does it, but I'll look for an opportunity to declare to whoever doesn't know me that I'm a non-drinker, because it gives me a buzz. I'll be honest. I enjoy that, and I enjoy the fact that I'm not doing what everybody else is doing. So 90% of people probably drink. I don't know what the percentage is, but if you go to a wedding, for example, pretty sure I'm going to be in the less than 10%, excluding the kids, of course. But every time I do declare that, and then, whether something comes back or not is irrelevant. I get a little bit of that 1%, and it embellishes my recovery program. Just saying that I don't drink, I don't need to drink. I don't. That sounds a bit condescending. I don't need to drink. I choose not to drink. But I will actually say, I had to stop because it was not doing me any good when I did do it. It wasn't a prudent move, shall we say? It wasn't conducive to my well-being.
I love the word choose and choice, and that's what I use every single day. I choose not to drink. I have chosen not to drink. It
consciously.
Drink.
The conscious choice.
And there's definitely that. Again, I can't remember the time frame on it. The first 3 to 6 months, I think, is the most uncomfortable sharing that you don't, or you stopped, or you're giving up, or whatever. But as Bash said, now when someone says, and I've had a couple of occasions in like restaurants where, do you want the wine list? And I'll go, I don't drink. Okay. And 1 or 2 people have made some like really snarky comments, in which case I don't leave a very nice tip. But it's, for the most part, and I've had some really nice stories over the last few months of people where I've maybe been a bit more outward facing on certain social media channels, or through close-ish family, close-ish friends that have gone on to do things, and they've stopped drinking for 6 months, or they've gone down this journey and they've lost a load of weight, and they're allowed to they're able now to have an operation. Or I've had clients of mine that have reached out and said they're 100 days sober and they've never felt better. So now when I say it, if it's a case of, am I nervous someone's going to make a comment, and I can get defensive, and I will bite back if someone says something. But now I think it's a way about saying it, and knowing if you say it in the right way, that sparks a journey. When I was working with Bash, we used to call it like the ripple effect. If you drop a little pebble in a pond and it ripples out, you never know what the positive impact is going to be on someone.
What I do in my job, either you can plant the seed, but you can't do the journey. And I used to get really frustrated and think, why aren't these people, because I work in recovery, I used to think, why aren't these people getting it? Hello, look at yourself, how many years? All you can do is plant that seed and hope that it grows.
Yeah. Mm. Giles, when or what did you imagine sobriety would look and feel like compared to what it is for you now?
I thought it'd be grim. I thought it'd be a lot harder. I thought I'd be constantly having to force myself to abstain. And when I've done it before, that's exactly what it's been initially. And then eventually it kind of wears off, and you go through this process. But having done it this way round, as you get into the root cause, as I think everybody has said, I actually feel confident now, and how it feels is like I'm awake. I'm present for the first time in a long time. I'm awake. I'm awake. I see the world. I see myself, and it's given me a confidence I didn't think I'd have. So, I can go. We were taking the mickey out of Bash going to his stag do in Cyprus. Of course, he could do that because he's on top of it and he knows why he does it. So, there might have been a little twang, muscle memory almost, but he's totally armed and prepared to not do that. So, I actually feel a lot more confident about being clean and being able to not do it again than I imagined I would,
Just on the confidence thing, that's something why I used to drink and behave in the way I did, was I was really, I think, chasing confidence. And my confidence over the last couple of years has gone like through the roof. Sounds like I'm now this egotistical maniac, but
no, that's confidence.
It's genuine confidence.
Yeah.
It's not synthetic.
Exactly the word I was going to use. And yeah, just way more confident. And the couple of conversations I've had recently, some is in today around, I said earlier, being at a stag do, wedding coming up, people have got to do speeches, this, that, and the other. A couple of beers beforehand, a few glasses of wine, just so I feel confident. I was just like, that's the polar opposite for me.
Yeah.
And that sparked a whole conversation.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be confident, if you've lived your life under the influence of one thing or another or whatever. When you start doing it sober, you are going to be low on confidence. But then I think it just comes down to like reps, and going to weddings has been a big thing for me the last couple of years. I think I've done like 13 or 14 sober weddings, which I'm pretty sure is some sort of world record. But the first one I went to, I was real fucking anxious, and had to take myself off to the hotel room and, sit down, play on my phone for a little bit, go for a walk, and then go back into it. And now there's times when I won't be there till 2:00 in the morning, because you don't need to be, but until 11, 12 o'clock at night and go to bed. But that's just through reps and just doing it again and again and again, and that confidence develops.
Either that trade-off of the anxiety beforehand versus the anxiety if you had used, they're the two, and it's unimaginable. That's why I think I might be anxious now, but tomorrow morning I'm going to be like 10 times more anxious. So what's worth that risk?
Yeah, it's a really good tool, that one, that fast forward tool. That's what kept me sober a lot in Cyprus that time. I just kept on fast forward, and every time I looked at it, I thought, how am I going to feel about myself? Even after I've done it, I'm going to feel like real shit.
I love how honest you've been with us about that, Bash, because it's really helped me.
Well, I'm just grateful I can be honest, to be honest, Jill, because if I don't know. I didn't know if I was going to use it or not. And I'm going to be genuine, because I've never been in that situation before, so I wouldn't be so arrogant to say that I can do this, because I hadn't been in that situation before. And I'm just grateful that I got through it, and I'm grateful that I can share that experience, or share it in that way. Who knows? Maybe if I had used, I could have shared it, found some juice in it, because as all of us in here know, we don't. Well, we don't relapse. We recycle. So each one of us, and every time we have picked up a drink or drug, on our journeys, we can look back and go, yeah, that's why I did it. And then you're embellishing your recovery program with it and coming back stronger.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, this has been an incredible conversation that we've all been having here today. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Before we do go, I just want to kind of check in with everybody, just one or two things that they'd like to share to anybody who's listening that they think might be helpful for them along the way. If we start with you, Ivor.
I think if you are, the phrase now I hear a lot more about is sober curious, but if you're thinking about going down that route, if you try it for a bit, it doesn't mean you have to stick with it. And if you give it a couple of weeks or 4 weeks, and if you can stop or abstain, see how your life changes for the better, would be my take. And then if you find it really difficult, then I think it's maybe something to go and look into. But I think from my perspective and what I've seen, friends, family, all that sort of stuff, that there are hundreds of thousands or millions of people behaving like I was. But that's just normal now. And my life has never been better. So Bash, thank you.
Oh, thanks so much. Thank you.
Giles.
If you're thinking of doing it, don't beat yourself up because the prescribed general consensus is you have to do it this way, and the other way. I don't do well in clubs and cults and stuff like that, and every book I read, and I don't get on well with meetings. I thought that I'm never going to be able to do it, but every human being is different, and there's 101 different ways to get better, but you can do it. Just do it, and don't have any not preconceived misconceptions about if you don't do it exactly this way and you don't do the 12 steps, you're a failure. Have a look around, find a program like Bash's, and just do it. Just do it because it's worth it. Whichever way you take to do it, don't procrastinate. Don't put it off, because we all do that. I'll do it in 3 months' time, or I'll just get past this, because you'll just keep putting it off, but I'll just do it because it's positive. It can only be positive if you have a go.
Yeah, nice one. Jill, what would you say to anyone who's sober curious out there?
I would say 3 C's: be curious, be confident, and be conscious.
Love
nice.
that. Yeah. I would say don't focus on the stopping too much, because you can do recovery work and still be using, which sounds a bit crazy, but I've worked with people that have carried on for 4, 5, 6 months on their journey, but they still managed to do the work. And when they were ready to stop, they had a whole toolkit of stopping. It wasn't like this massive mountain. I mean, I think, Giles, when you were ready, you were like literally like a greyhound, weren't you? You're like a greyhound in the traps. You're like, I'm ready to stop now. Let's do this. And that's, I think, doing the work before you actually stop can be an advantage for some people, because I think one of the phrases I use quite a lot is what people fear most about stopping when they're in addiction is stopping, right? Otherwise, who would stop, right? If it wasn't so scary. But if you do the work, you can almost like get a vision of what it feels like and what it looks like. And, once you've created that sense of self within that environment, even though you're getting on it every weekend or whatever, you're sort of, using those little 1%ers, those 1%ers to feel good about yourself, raise your vibration. And then you get to that point, I don't want to do this anymore. What a weird feeling that I don't want to do what I've been doing for the past 20 years. So that would be my advice. Don't feel just because you get in recovery, it means you've got to stop. You can get in recovery and carry on using it until you're ready to stop.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's a funny one, that fear, which is often what we're dealing with a lot of the time. But I find with guys I'm working with, first they fear stopping, and then when they stop, they fear starting again. And so it's like the fear just like switches over. And so if we can actually work, there's that great quote: "The only thing to fear is fear itself."
Yeah.
If we can start working with that fear and overcoming that, then it makes a huge difference. Well, listen, Ivor, Giles, Jill, Bash, I appreciate you all so much for coming on today.
I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I've really enjoyed it.
Amazing conversation. I think Jill said, therapeutic. And I think a lot of people listening are going to relate so much. They're going to hear themselves in what you've all been sharing, which is absolutely huge. And so thank you to anyone who's listening.
Massive gratitude, because you've really guided us through something that could have been quite triggering. So huge thank you to you for your professional and empathetic approach.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, you've facilitated in a really sublime way. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it is much needed in recovery. This is how we when we learn how to be this towards ourselves, I think it makes such a massive difference as well.
In it together, hey guys.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening. Thank you. Take care, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.